Do you really need $1 million to comfortably retire? This channel, we love to run numbers for people. So I'm going to just start running some numbers for you. Let's say, for example, you have $500,000, not a million, but half of that saved up. You got 500,000 as your beginning balance. Figure you need 4,500 a month in expenditures, which would be $54,000 a year. You're going to allow yourself a 2% COLA, which won't keep up with inflation, but will give you a raise each year and see how your money will last. Now, what we're going to do is take into account Social Security. The average Social Security payment in January 2024, according to the SSA, the Social Security Administration, it was $1,907, which means you don't need 4,500 coming from your nest egg. You only need this 4,500 minus this right here if you're taking Social Security immediately. And that's what we're going to run some numbers just to show you this. So you're going to need 2,593 out of your nest egg. Also, we want to do a asset allocation. But we're going to run down through there, see what might be the most beneficial asset allocation. So we're going to go ahead and run the numbers for every single year. Right now, we got 1924 numbers. These are the returns from 1924 going on, which is what we do on this channel. We run using average returns for the last 100 years of the S&P 500, and we project ahead to what similar returns might do for you in the future. So let's go down through here and see how these numbers change. Again, we're doing a 2% COLA on 4,500, but you only need 2,593 out of your nest egg because you're taking Social Security in the very first year. Okay, let's see 1924 numbers. This is a summary box. This is the remaining balance going down with all of it staying in the S&P 500. We aren't going to stay with that very long, but I just want to show you the difference here, though. So this is a summary box going down through 1924. This is the amounts remaining after 10, after 15, 20, and 25 years, and so on. Watch how that changes when you're 1925. What's happening is we get closer and closer to those initial years being down years. You're going to see these numbers turning negative after 15, 20 years and so on. 1926, after 20 years, you're actually running out of money. You have 100, actually, you still got 150,000 left. Now you got 44,000 left after 20 years, but you're out of money in less than 25 years. 1928, see the difference that made? Now you're out of money in 13 years. Why? Because you only had one good year, 1928, before you hit all these down years of the Depression type returns. I want to go through here and show you the difference. We're going to use 1929 numbers where you're actually out of money in 8 years. But I want to show you how changing your asset allocation so it's not all in the stock market. Because obviously the stock market's just going down like crazy and you're taking this money out, knocking it down even faster. Watch the numbers change up here as I change the asset allocation from 100% in stocks to 90% in stocks, 80%. Finally, at 70-30, you got some money remaining. Your money lasts 11 years. How about 60-40? Now you got 107,000 left, which money lasts in 13. How about 50-50? 129,000. Again, we're looking at the worst case scenario in the last 100 years, folks. What it would take to have your money last 60-40. In other words, 40% staying in the S&P 500 when it's going down like this, and 60% over in a cash reserve account. Then you got 150,000 left after 10 years, but your money's gone in 14 years. You can see it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. A 70-30 split, last 15 years, last 16 years. Why? Because you're not having any money in the stock market. Well, let's go ahead and change a couple of numbers here, folks. Let's go back to all of it in the S&P 500. Let's go ahead and pick some other years here. 1930, well, you only have 3 down years. Still running out of money in 9 years. And watch when the money's running out. That's a 90-10 split. Your money's lasting 12 years. Lasting 12 years. Again, it's not. It's lasting a little bit longer. But it looks like it's not the asset allocation as near as important as what's going on those initial years. They call this sequence of returns risk. Let's just say you only had 3 down years. Now with leaving it all in the S&P 500, which of course nobody would recommend that, but Money's gone in 14 years. Watch the changes now. Now it's gone in 15, 18, 19, 18. It's going back down. Looks like 19 is about the max. 70-30 split. 70% stay in the S&P 500. Again, folks, we're looking at the worst case scenario. Let's go to something a little more recent. The problem with going recent is we don't have 25 and 30 years. When we go to the 19, let's go to the 1999 numbers here. Again, I'm trying to answer the question, can I retire with less than $1 million? We're just doing a scenario where somebody needs $54,000 a year and they're getting the average Social Security return. So they need this kind of money initially, and we're increasing that by 2% a year. Hopefully this makes sense here. So here we use 1999 numbers. Yeah, I'll go up a little bit higher here. 1997 numbers, you had 3 good years before we had the 3 down years, 2000, 2002, and then down 37% in 2008. Again, folks, what we're doing is using the numbers in the worst case scenario. We're looking at the worst case scenario, which the decade of the 1930s, the Depression years, and the decade of the 2000s, where we had 4 down years in that decade, including that down 37%. So that's when we run into a little bit of problems. Again, nobody knows the future, but we're just kind of projecting ahead what you might have and see how the asset allocation might help you. Right now, 1997 numbers, no problem. It's just growing as time goes on. You got, well, it dropped a little bit from the 10th to the 15th year, but it's 1997 numbers, no problem because you had some good years before you had the down years. How about 1998? Now it's getting a little bit iffy after 25 years. 1999, that's when you run into a problem and your money's gone in 16 years. But what haven't we taken into account? Changing your asset allocation. So we see that 1999 numbers run into problems if you left it all in the S&P 500. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and let's do a 90-10 split. See how these numbers, this is a summary box right here. This can help us see how just changing your asset allocation can really help. Okay, you got lasting 15 years. Lasting 16 years, this isn't changing much. 70-30 split, lasting 17 years. 17 is just basically staying at 17 as we go down through and changing your asset allocation. Again, what's going on here? We're reaching a bad string of returns. They call that sequence of returns risk. If that happens near the beginning of when you first retire, it can be really problematic. But let's go back. Let's just 2000 is going to be even worse because we have the 3 down years before we even have any positives. Let's go to 2001 where you have 2 down years. Did that help much? Not really, but if you just have the 1 down year, now you've got 212,000 left after 20 years because you only had 1 down year. Then you had a bunch of good years. Yes, you had the down 37%, but it came back so nicely after that. So we can see the problem areas are if we have returns like the Depression years, and the decade of the 2000s, we see that it doesn't really help a whole lot with changing your asset allocation. It helps some, but if you have start out with some down years, you can really have a problem no matter what your asset allocation because the market's being knocked down so much, unless, of course, you don't have any money in the stock market. But you want to have some in the stock market so you can get these kind of gains. The markets always come back. We see that over and over again over the last 100 years. Yes, you have some down years, but look how it comes back to green. Look at these returns, folks. Even after the 73, 74, down 14, down 26, look how it came back. Up 37, up 23. That's why you don't see problems with it. 73, 74. This is the actual graph showing you right here. Actually, it's not because I don't have something showing here. Let's see here. What am I missing? Oh. We haven't updated this. It's going to show you for every single year for the last 100 years how these kind of numbers would have worked out. We can see we have a problem in 1999. Looks like 90% of the time after 20 years, you'll be just fine with this scenario. We change it to say a 70-30 split. Let me see which one looks like the best. 70-30 is 77,000. 64 is 88,000. 50-50 is 90,000. 91,000. Looks like along about a 50-50 split. So let's go ahead and update this and see if this 10% changes. Hopefully I'm not losing you here. I'm running all kinds of different numbers here, just trying to show you how changing the asset allocation can help in some years, but some years it doesn't help that much. Looks like you're successful 81% of the time with a 50-50 split. Let's go to a 70-30 split. 70% staying in the S&P 500 because you really like to have a lot of money in there, even in retirement, because you're going to get these beneficial returns. But let's see how many times. Right now you got 19% failure rate. Now you're down to a 10% failure rate. That's with a 70-30 split. The problem years would be around the Depression years and again around the year 2000. All these other years, you're just be in great shape with a 70-30 split with these kind of numbers. That's what we do as channel. We run numbers for people. Again, withdrawal rate in this case is 6.22. That's a little bit high. That's why you're running into problems. How many percent of the time? Almost 10% of the time after 20 years and 11% of the time after 30 years. But if you would just cut back just $250 a month, let's see how that might change all these numbers. Instead of a 10% and 11% failure rate, let's see what it does when it updates this. Again, we're doing a 70-30 split here. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers. Look at it, cut it in half, your failure rate. Now you got a 95% success rate after 20 years and 94% after 30 years, just going from 4,500 down to 4,250. Now we could run all kinds of different numbers, and that's what we do on this channel. I don't want to make this video real long. We could change when you start taking Social Security. We could obviously do a different amount here. Our whole point was you don't need $1 million to retire. In many cases, especially when you take into account Social Security, and we can change the asset allocation, and most of the time you'd be just fine, except for if we had depression type returns in the future and around the year 2000 returns in the future. If we have 3 down years in a row, if we have 4 down years in a row, like the depression years, and then 3 more down years right here, then we might enter problems. But most case scenarios, you can be just fine, even with 2 down years, like in 1970s. Let's look at the actual 1970 numbers here. And because the market came back so nicely, even though you had 3 down years, look at this summary box here, folks. It's just fine because you came back so nicely. Up 37, up 23, yes, down 7. Well, look how it came back. We had the 80s and so on. So this problematic 2 down years, 2 consecutive down years didn't have near the impact as 3 down years or 4 down years. So hopefully this makes sense to you. I just love running different numbers. I love changing the asset allocation to see how it might affect these numbers. But you can see it's kind of minimal in some ways. It all depends on what those initial years are. If you run into something as recently as 1999, and you're running out of money in a little over 20 years, year 2000, you're running out of money in 17 years, year 2001. You've got some money left after 20 years, but you're getting really low. But that shows the importance of those initial years. If they're down years, you can change the asset allocation, but it doesn't change a whole lot. Let's just show it again the year 2000. Here we're down to 67,000 after 15 years. What about an 80-20 split? 37, 60-40, you got more, 74,000. And here you got 82,000 and 125,000. Then if you know that stock market's going to go down, you might want to go to a 40-60 split. In other words, 40% staying in the S&P 500 and 60% going into a cash reserve account. How about, looks like it's reached the limit there. 60-40 is the best case scenario. Again, I'm throwing a lot at you. I just want to show you it's really important what happens those initial years to what you're doing, to how long your money might last with this kind of amount. Do you need $1 million? Looks like most of the time you don't. If you start out with some down years, consecutive down years like the year 2000, 2002, you might have some issues if you needed this kind of income, and this is what you're getting from Social Security. But thanks so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Please let people know we run all kinds of different numbers just to show you. We point out some principles that can help you, like what your asset allocation should be and how it affects it, depending on what the market's doing. But thank you so much for watching.